Hi, we're the cast of The Accountant 2, and we're playing How Well Do You Know Your Castmates?
Which person flexed their acting skills at the age of 10 by walking an imaginary dog for 3 weeks to prove to their mother they could handle a real dog?
Ben.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Ben.
Congratulations. Ben's the most foolish person here and obvious.
That's the first story you told me when we met.
Is it really?
No, I'm kidding. I was like, wow.
I'm getting predictable.
Wait, may I ask what that was?
It was my mom trying to hustle me. So I was like, I want a dog, I want a dog. She was like, walk the dog around the block for a month. And I started doing it. She was like, it. No, we're not getting the dog anyway. I learned early about that your parents' feet are made of clay.
Was that your first method acting experience?
Well, I wasn't acting. I had to walk around the block with a leash. It was like, something different than acting.
This is it, huh? Living on a lunchbox.
It's quite comfortable.
Which person directed a film that contains almost 300 F words?
Daniella.
That would be yes, but I'm gonna go with Gavin.
I'm gonna go with Ted.
Oh wait, yeah. No.
I think it's Gavin.
300?
Argo doesn't have 300 F
Lawyer.
words, does it?
You know what I said?
No, what?
Argo, yourself.
I'll tell you what, it pales in
yeah.
comparison to Honora.
What?
You want to talk about F-bombs? I mean, in one scene they had about 300.
You're like, there is a movie that has more.
I mean, Honora blew good for
Yeah.
Is it me with Pride and Glory?
Yes, it is You with Pride and Glory.
Wonderful movie.
Now what the is going on here?
What was it like working with Ed Norton and Colin Farrell?
And Edward and Colin are watching.
I enjoyed both of them. I think Edward has his proclivities, but the thing I did love about Edward is that he really, really cares. And that was always what sort of got us through everything, was I always believed how much he was passionate about the work. And Colin was just awesome. He's a great actor, and he's just a great partner when you're working with him, so.
End of story.
These two people both appeared on The Vampire Diaries in the same season, but their characters never met.
Yeah, those scenes too.
You were Vampire Diaries?
I was.
Oh, that's the thing I get most recognized for. My God. And they gave me this weird, gnarly death where I was like bleeding out of all my orifices to like a bad Nickelback cover. So shout out to that.
I think I died twice on that show.
Yeah, they
I
were.
was decapitated by a graduation cap at the high school
not easy.
graduation.
That's pretty cool.
Not method
It's
acting.
like a very Bond graduation death.
Which person played professional baseball in Russia
Bernthal.
before?
It's a process of elimination. He's the only one who got pressure.
I don't know why you didn't guess me. My athleticism didn't shine.
Speaking of baseball, you mentioned you want to play Yogi Berra. What specifically drew you to him?
Oh man, Yogi Berra. I mean, he's a catcher. I'm a catcher. You know, everything that comes out of his mouth. His
Greatest quotes
poetry.
ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Greatest
just like,
quotes.
yeah.
Good dialogue.
Yeah.
The best one, I think, too, is that when it comes to the fork, you won't take it.
Ben, you're a Red Sox fan. How do you feel about that?
Listen, these are legendary figures. I have nothing but respect for these great figures from sports. I'm unlike John. I didn't quite reach professional level, my own personal skill set.
Russia.
But I'm a big fan.
Which person read lines with Tom Holland for his Spider-Man audition tapes?
God.
Yeah, John.
What was it like reading lines with him? Did you know right away that he was going to be the perfect
He
Spider-Man?
knew. He knew. I mean, he knew. I'm working with him right now.
He's terrific.
So like he's the best. He is the best, and he had such drive that young kid. He's like, I am gonna get this. And I was like, I don't know. A lot of people probably want it, buddy. But but we actually were in a very tiny town in Ireland making this movie in the west coast of Ireland, and he read with me for Punisher, and I read with him for Spider-Man, and we both got cast over there.
A lucky charm.
Yeah, but no, he was wonderful.
Don't tell Aunt May.
One more question about The Punisher. What aspects of Frank Castle's story do you still feel need to be explored?
I think it's kind of endless. I think like I'm a husband, I'm a dad, and I think until you can really start to understand what it's like to love people way more than you love yourself, you can start to imagine what it would be if they were taken from you, and I think we all have that. So I think that well is kind of endless, and yeah, I don't think there's any end to that one.
I think it's every time I try to be something different, that's when the wrong people get hurt.
This co-star is the youngest person to ever win an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
Oh, who's that? I wonder who that is.
I guess that's me.
Do Do you have any particularly memorable moments from that night?
I remember that we took our moms, and I remember that everybody was surprised and made a thing out of it. And I was like, you think we're going to take someone else? You know what I mean? Like, we were at that age where moms were like, we're coming. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, Mom, I guess we're going to the Oscar. It was surreal. It was great. It was wonderful. It was a really spectacular time. And also, like, in a lot of ways, probably too young to appreciate it, but it was a very unique vantage point to go from watching it in the Oscars in Somerville, Massachusetts the year before, the Oscar pool, and then next year being there and Billy Crystal was like singing about Matt, and I just kept thinking, like, it was before that movie, but I was like, this must be a simulation. Like, this is the Matrix. You know, I felt like, am I in a test or something? You know, it seemed too bizarre and to be real.
You don't owe it to yourself. You owe it to me.
This person overcame their fear of performing underwater to train for a role in this popular Prime Video series.
'Tis I.
There we go.
Everyone's underwater on that show. So I've heard.
I would hate that. That would actually give me a lot of anxiety.
Well, it did give me a lot of anxiety, and like sometimes you get presented these things that you're like, no, I'm not interested in doing that. And it's sort of, you get to learn about yourself. You get to sort of overcome something, which
what
I
did
think...
you do to make it less anxious for you?
You know how like sound travels underwater? So I felt like what freaked me out was just hearing like the void. And so I needed them to play music underwater because I thought if I just hear the sound of my own thoughts, I'm gonna panic and I'm gonna have all these like panicky thoughts. So I just asked them to play music underwater.
What was your playlist?
It was Bjork.
Was it really?
Yeah, I needed something kind of like ethereal and
Yeah.
weird. And if I just sort of, not to be cheesy, but if I surrender.
Or like Enya or something.
Are you comfortable in the water besides?
No.
We will find our course.
Which person was kicked out of choir in high school because they pretended to be possessed by a demon on stage?
Is that you?
That's me. There's a longer story to that, but basically I hated choir, and so I just was over it, and so I pretended to be possessed by a demon, and everyone laughed. They thought it was really funny. Then I almost got expelled over that. And then they tried to convince my dad that I was under the influence, and my dad was like, I drove her to the choir performance. She wasn't under, she was with
But
me
she
the whole
was
time.
possessed by a demon. And I wish they would address this.
Well, that sounds like witch business.
This person's first major Hollywood film depicted the U.S. men's ice hockey team's victory in the 1980 Winter Olympics.
Do you believe in miracles?
What was one of your biggest takeaways from shooting that film?
It was my first studio movie, so I remember when I got the job, I said to them that I'm gonna, which speaks to what you were just saying, Ben. I said, look, because they wanted all the like young actors, and I'm like, how am I gonna get all these young actors to learn to skate at the level I need these kids to skate? And they were like, well, you just use doubles and blah, blah. And I was like, that's like the worst idea I've ever heard. I'm not gonna do that. I said, I'd rather get kids who can like ace it on the ice and teach them how to not act. Like that to me felt like the way, a smarter approach. And we really went like this, and I just dug in on that one.
That was the way it was mostly done.
Yeah.
Yeah, movies like Major League.
I remember, back in the day, and you had to say if you wanted to audition. I actually had a little bit of integrity, and I owned up to the fact that I couldn't ice skate. I used to be like, dude, I can do anything. I can do rodeo. I'm an astronaut. I can do anything if it gets me a job. And I was like, I literally cannot frickin' ice skate.
Can't lie about that
like there's no way.
You know what's interesting though is the studio wanted Michael Douglas to play Herb, and he looks like Herb.
Yeah.
And I met with Michael. It was a great meeting. I'm a big fan of his, but I was emphasizing that you need to skate because Herb Brooks played on the 1960 Olympic hockey team. And I remember leaving there and I called up the studio. I said, can I just meet with Kurt Russell? Because I knew that Kurt was living in Canada. His son was a hockey player. And Kurt's been in locker rooms all his life. He's a baseball player. And that authenticity. So, you know, Kurt said to me he picked me up at the airport, and his first question that Kurt says to me, he goes, what do you think of the script? The script was not very good. And I go, it sucks. And he went, we're gonna be all right.
Tonight, we are the greatest hockey team.